happens, that happened to me too. We're going to find ourselves in John 21 this morning. We are going to be walking through a bit of the life of Peter. Before we do that, I want to explain that it's going to be a little bit unorthodox. You're going to see a little bit of the way my brain operates. The good news is that Josh will be back next week. So if you don't like it, you can complain about how bad it's been since he's been gone, and how bad I was. But he'll be back, so you can do that. But before we do that, I'd like to start with prayer. Father, we thank you so much for being able to come in your presence this morning. That we come to sing songs to prepare our heart to hear your word. God, I ask that you speak today. Whether that be through or in spite of me. Your word is heard. And God, that we change because of it. When we leave, we look a little bit more like you. We look a little bit more loving. God, in your son's precious name. Amen. Just to be clear, because sometimes I don't listen when I speak, I thought I'd make a visual for us today. Peter's who we're talking about, okay? If you've got questions about it, we can refer back up to the board.
Oh, Peter.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you, man. The one person listening. Peter got to live a very interesting life. But his life was interesting because of who he knew, not because of who he was. Peter was a fisherman. He was an average guy. He had a job no different than me or you. He's not a superhero in the Bible, right? He wasn't calling fire down from heaven. That wasn't Peter. Just a guy. What I love about Peter is that he had opportunity after opportunity to do some incredible things. And he messed it up. He just fell flat on his face. He was a failure. It's a fair word to define Peter. But above any of that, Peter was a recipient of God's grace. And that's what we're going to look at today. You might have noticed by now that I would hesitate to say, a beautiful assistant on stage. She's way too smart to be anyone's assistant, much less mine. Amen. But someone with much better handwriting is up on stage. So Emily is going to continue to write down a few words that we covered this morning. Because we really are going to cover about 20 to 25 years of Peter's life. In about 25 to 28 minutes, hopefully. Otherwise, I'll be in trouble if I go any longer and you guys will get hungry. Amen. And so as we cover these time frames, man, you are the biggest supporter I've ever had. As we cover these time frames, she's going to write down some of the highlights of Peter's life. You can't see the yellow, I'm sorry. That just says the recipient of God's grace. And she's going to write down some of the shortcomings of Peter as well. And we're going to begin to build his resume. Like I said, we're going to pick up in John 21. When we start reading, like we typically would, it's going to be in verse 18. But to get there, let me set the stage. This is after the death, after the resurrection. The disciples are out fishing because they don't really know what else to do. They know that Jesus is alive. Yes, even Thomas believes it at this point. They're out in the boat, and they're not having a very good day. They're not catching anything. They're hungry, and they're not pulling up any fish. And this guy walks up to the shore and says, "Cast your net on the other side." Sure, they've never tried that, right? Sure enough, they try it. And they pull up more fish than they know what to do. Peter remembers. Hey, the last time this happened, it was Jesus. It was when Jesus was calling me to come be a fisher of men, whatever that meant. But he knew it was Jesus. And he couldn't wait for the boat to get in. Peter loved Jesus. He so enthusiastically jumps out of the boat, swims all the way back to go see Jesus. We're going to see time and time again, this is within his personality. Peter often leaps before he thinks. He's the first to stand up, the first to do anything. Peter, a natural-born leader, is certainly a way we can describe him. The rest of the disciples eventually catch up, or they were the responsible ones that brought in the boat, however you want to look at it. The boat comes to shore. The disciples unload. If there's any way we can write that a little bigger, I think we'll have people not being able to see it. If they can. If you can, it'd be great. I saw the... But the disciples come in off the boat, and they all sit down. Peter's probably still soaking wet, and they begin to make a fire, eat some of that fish. And what's going to happen now at this point is that Jesus and Peter are going to begin to have a conversation. Dialogue. And instead of me just reading it to you, I'm going to play a video clip of the conversation, and then I'm going to give you a possible response of Peter. And now I don't have biblical evidence to say this is exactly what he thought in the moment. Maybe it wasn't what he was thinking. But I thought it'd be a creative way to cover all of these highlight story reels of Peter's life. without me having to sit here and read it to you. Without further ado, this is the conversation that transpires between Jesus and Peter.
Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these?
Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love them.
Feed my lambs.
Jesus, why would you have to ask me? Don't you know that I love you? Don't you remember? I had a good life. I had a family, I had friends, I had a job. Okay, maybe I was a little smelly when I went home, but that happens. I enjoyed my life. And then you came along. And you told me to follow you. And I don't know why, but I just did it. Wherever you went, I went. From Judea to Jerusalem, I walked with you. I was with you. Have I not shown my devotion? Have I not shown my love and my care for you throughout our entire life together, Jesus? Why would you have to ask me such a question? Do you remember the crowds? They would swarm you. I would help facilitate them, help put them where they needed to be. You had all that leftover fish and bread. I'm still not really sure how you did that one. And I went and picked it up. Have I not been your servant? Going ahead of you when you needed a room? Do you not know that I love you? Why would you have to ask me such a question? And Jesus, do you not remember? When they came to arrest you, everyone else ran away. I alone stood boldly. I was the one that had your back. I was defending you. I would have taken his head off if you not have ducked. Don't you know that I love you? Why would you ask me such a question?
Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me?
Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee.
Feed my sheep.
Why would you have to ask me again? Jesus, you know all things. Don't you, surely you, don't you know my heart? You know all things. Maybe that's precisely why you ask. You know every time that I've failed. Every single time that I've let you down, you must remember. Maybe, Jesus, it was the time those kids, they wanted to come to you, and I kept them from you. Jesus, so many times you would speak in parables, you would give these stories, and you would ask if we understood, and I would always answer, and then my foot landed in my mouth. Maybe John's right. Maybe I am just a loud mouth. Jesus, maybe you're not upset about that. Maybe it was the constant bickering between me and the other disciples. We wanted to know who was best, who was to sit at your right hand. How arrogant and foolish to think any of that ever mattered. Jesus, maybe you're talking about when you wanted to go raise Lazarus from the dead. None of us understood what you were doing. It had never been done before. All we knew is that people in Judea, they wanted to kill us. Why did we want to go back there? I was not bold that day. I was a coward. Thomas was the one willing to go, not I. Maybe you're talking about that night you were arrested. I was a horrible friend. When you needed me, you warned me. But I heard that rooster crew. I know what I did. Jesus, I'm sorry, but I denied you 3 times. Maybe you're talking about the time I almost drowned. For a moment, I looked at you. Then I took my eyes off of you. No wonder you have to ask if I love you. I've given you every reason to know.
Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me?
Lord, thou knowest all things. Thou knowest that I love thee.
Feed my sheep.
Why would you have to ask me a question at all? You're the one that knows everything. I've seen you tell people what they think before they even knew they had the thought. I've watched you do it. Why would you ask me a question 3 times? Unless the question's not for you, what if the question's for me? Jesus, are you really saying that if I love you, you still have a plan for me? After what I did, after everything I did wrong, you still want to use me? I can't even imagine that that's what you mean. I can't hope that. But I see no other answer. Peter had a very interesting conversation with Jesus that day. Possibly thinking of everything he did right. Possibly thinking of everything he did wrong. But ultimately Jesus said, if you still love me, you will feed my sheep. And Peter, being Peter, isn't okay with that answer. He wants more information. Remember, he's a loudmouth. He doesn't know when to shut up. Maybe that's why I like him so much. Later. The conversation continues in verses 18 through 22. Jesus speaking to Peter. I assure you, when you were young, you would tie your belt and walk wherever you wanted. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hand and someone else will tie you and carry you where you do not want to go. He said this to signify by what kind of death he would glorify God. After saying this, he told him, follow me. So Peter turned around and saw the disciple Jesus loved following him. That disciple was the one who had leaned back against Jesus at the supper and asked, Lord, who is the one who is going to betray you? When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, Lord, what about him? Jesus' response, if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? As for you, follow me. Jesus made it pretty clear to Peter he wasn't worried about John right now. He wasn't worried about Thomas right now. He was talking to Peter. Peter, yes, I know what you've done. I know how boldly you stood for me. I know how much you've loved me. I've seen your devotion. But Peter, yes, I know what you've done. I know you've denied me. I know you turned your back on me. I know that you were a coward. I know that you didn't understand. Peter, I want you to follow me. I want you to feed my sheep. And Peter asked what I believe to be a very fair question. Jesus, why me? What about John? Why Peter? Precisely the question we're going to try to discover. Because Jesus could have chosen anyone. The rest of his disciples were sitting right there. He's not limited like me and you are. He knew who was through the entire world. He could have chosen any of them. But in this moment, he chose Peter. And I wonder why. Before I begin to try to explain that, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, look at his resume. He was average. Yeah, he was enthusiastic. He was devout. Surely a servant. But he was bold. He was a leader. But so many times he wasn't. So many times that enthusiasm led to him being a loudmouth. That devotion was not seen when he betrayed Jesus. It wasn't there. He was not being a servant when he was talking about who was best. He was not bold when he was running for his life. He was a coward. His resume doesn't scream qualified. His green certainly does not outweigh his red. Why in the world, Peter? But I hope we see something about that board, if we can see it, right? I hope we see there's some relatability to it. Peter probably had a job just like me and you. Not looked up upon, just a job. Peter's screwed up a time or two. Anybody else relate to being a loudmouth, or just me and my brother sitting here, right? Oh, there we go. There. Mr. Amen in the back should have raised his hand after the fourth. Relatable. I don't know about you guys, I failed more times than I care to remember. I'm sure there are friends that can tell you that I wasn't there when they were. But ultimately, it doesn't matter what Peter did. Because we could have put John's name here. He would have had just as much right. Any of the other 12? Could have listed them. Honestly, we could have put any believer's name in all of history in this spot. Any believer's name in this room in this spot. Would it not have had red and green? Was there not times in our life, and I don't know where you find yourself this morning, where we feel like this? We feel like, man, I got it. I've been praying, I've been reading my Bible, life's going well, I'm successful at my job, my family's happy with me, my friends are happy with me. Man, life's going good. We have those moments. So did Peter. We also feel the red sometimes. We also feel like, I don't know how to get out of bed tomorrow. I don't know how I'm going to go to work. I'm so anxious and depressed and afraid. I don't know how tomorrow looks for me. So do people. For those of you that are having a hard time seeing, or maybe not relating to the green or the red, I assure you there's a lot of white space left on this board. There's a lot more stories about Peter we can cover. A lot more highs and lows that he went through. If you don't relate to one of the words now, you probably will. But Jesus didn't choose Peter because of Peter. Ultimately, the answer to the question, why Peter? Because it was never about Peter. When Jesus came, he erased absolutely all of our resume. Our ledger was gone. No red, no green left to be seen. Simply Christ. No matter how hard we work, no matter how much we do, the best case scenario is we add some more green ones. Best case scenario, we try desperately to cover up all of the red. We try so hard to make sure nobody sees it, but no matter what I do, I can't erase a single thing on that board. I never could. Here's the great news. It was done for me. Jesus chose Peter not because of Peter. He chose Peter because of who he was, through who he was going to do. He just happened to let Peter help him do it. We always like to celebrate that the red words are gone, and yes, that's fantastic. My sin is erased. It is no more. Everything that I've done, everything I will do is gone. It's forgiven. But you know what disappeared too? Every green word on the board. Because between Peter and Jesus, it was not a religion. It was a relationship. Peter did not have to be anything for Jesus to love him, because he wasn't. He didn't have to do enough for Jesus to love him because he was a screw. Jesus loved him because Jesus chose to, because that's what Jesus does. And it's not just Peter. Like I said, any name can fit on that board. It's not about me. It's not about you. So the question moves away from why Peter. If it's all about Jesus, is he worth it? Is he worth following? Apparently he requires quite a bit. Follow me. Leave your entire life and come be with me. That's not a small ask. Is he worth it? I can't answer that question for you, but I can tell you Peter's answer. Peter said, with my entire life, yes. Peter would go on to be one of the greatest evangelists ever known in history. To start the church, we wouldn't be here today the way that we are if not for the acts of Peter. Now, Peter would go on to screw up again and get called out by his brother Paul for it rather loud, rather public. But yet he would ultimately serve God until the day that he died a martyr's death. Peter said it was worth it. And I can only speak for myself when I tell you I agree with Peter wholeheartedly. Without a shadow of a doubt, Jesus is worth it. And I say that because of this. I know I've read the statistics of where we grew up, of what my life should look like, of what I should be, and I'm not. It's not because of me. I stand here today because of Jesus. And I know that I have hope and joy and peace in circumstances that I should not be having those feelings. That I should be angry and upset, and I should feel lost and desperate. But I have hope because Jesus is there. I'm never going back. What is there left back? And so I follow him because I got nowhere else I'm going. And so if you happen to agree with Peter, and you think he's worth following, what is our role? What does that look like to feed his sheep? Jesus, this is not the first time that he begins to answer that question. See, in John 14:15, I about dropped the whole paper. He says, if you love me, you'll keep my commands. And I'm going to pull this up on the board. If you read it while I'm talking, that'd be great. I'm going to read it here in a moment. But I have to pause to thank Paul. Without intent, without coordination, you have set me up for the thesis of the sermon this morning, and I want to thank you immensely for that. If you missed last week, Paul spoke, I think, very effectively and boldly on the fact of God's absolute unchanging truth. That what God has said from Genesis will be true until Revelation. And what our culture defines it as is irrelevant. What we feel about it, irrelevant. How we want to outsmart it, we can't. God's truth stands, firm and unwavering. That is who he is. Just as equally, this is who he is. Dear friends, let us love one another, because love is from God. And everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. The one who does not love does not know God, because God is love. Just as equally, with just as much passion as he is truth, as he demands justice, as he hates sin, he loves the sinner. For in his very essence, while he is truth, while he is just, he is also love. So what does it look like for us to follow him? It looks like us to love others. Remember when he had this conversation with Peter, feed my sheep? The parable of the Good Samaritan has already happened. Jesus has already established that your neighbor who he wants you to love is anyone that you come into contact with. That's already happened. So now, are we loving them? Are we living the life that we're called to live as believers? Are we loving others? And I wish that I could sit up here and pat us all on the back and say, we got it. And I hope this doesn't come as a surprise. I hope it isn't too discouraging on a Sunday morning. But when polled by a secular world, the Big C American church is epically failing. The answer to the question, are we loving, is no. We are not defined by love. We are not defined by hospitality. We are not defined by our inclusiveness. To the outside world, we are defined as judgmental. We like to condemn people. Or hypocritical is the number one answer. And we're exclusive, not inclusive. But I say that after I've erased the board for a reason. We don't have to sit here in guilt. We don't have to sit here in shame. Because as a Big C church, we're not doing our job. Because guess what? That was erased too. Because it's still not about us. But we do have a call to live a lot like the one that we're following. And if we want to love like him, we need to start changing some things. I'll tell you, one of the greatest challenges I've ever been given was from one of my college professors. She came into the class one morning, and on the board, she wrote, the church can eliminate abortion. Told us that our job was to figure out how to do that. And then she just left the class for 45 minutes and just gone. She came back, and all of us young freshmen, we all thought we were geniuses. We certainly had our answer to how to fix that. Surprise, right? She comes in, and with her 3 doctorates, I believe that she knows how to do research. I trust her in that. So when she brought forward documentation that says that 99% of abortions in America do not happen as second chance birth control. There are cheaper, more convenient ways to do that. 99% of the abortions that happen in America are out of perceived necessity of the woman, or in a lot of cases, the girl that finds herself in this situation. That their family, if they have one that loves them, is ashamed of what they've done and has kicked them out. The guy that did it, that said, oh, I love you and I'll stay with you, is nowhere to be found, because he thinks he can run away. Maybe they've lost their job, maybe they can't keep their job and raise a child, and they can't afford child support or child care. Maybe they don't even have a house to live in. And so they think they have no other option. And I'll tell you what, if I found myself in that situation, I'd be a little scared too. And her proposition, my professor, was this: the church can eliminate it, not through any political agenda, not through who's in office, doesn't matter, not through protests, not through standing outside and guilting and shaming them, but by doing what absolutely no one in their life has done, By stepping beside them and going, I still love you. You still have value. What can I do to assist you to have this child? And then when the church does that, it looks like hooking them up with someone that's been a mother and going, hey, you've raised 3 kids. Could you teach her what it looks like? Oh, you don't have a job? We have people that are really good at teaching job skills. Let us show you how to go get a job. You need somewhere to live? Let's get you something in an intern. Let's provide for your needs. Let's take care of you so that you're comfortable and you feel like you can have this child. And her proposal is that if the church stepped up to be the church and we loved the way that Jesus did, that the church wouldn't have any empty seats anymore. Because all of those single mothers and all of their children would be sitting in the pews with us. And there's 2 reasons I think we have such a problem with that. The first is when your red words aren't the same as mine, I got a problem. Because my red words are okay. I struggle with them. I'm comfortable with them. They're socially acceptable red words. Your red words are different. I look at you a certain way. I'll tell you what, I think that problem comes from this problem we have simply by being human. We have a really hard time understanding God being all just and all loving at the same time. And there are plenty of verses, plenty of scholars, plenty of authors I could have quoted. And yet I look where John 3:16 and John 3:17 land in the Bible. And it seems intentional, almost like that's how math works. I don't know, I'm not very good at it. But for God so loved the world, he sent his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. We've seen that. The Son of Man came into the world not to condemn it, but to save it. If anyone had a right to come judge us, if anyone had a right to come condemn us, it's not me and it's not you, it was him. He didn't. He came to save us. And abortion is only one application when we begin to love differently. One example. But if we want to be like Jesus, we ought and should, as Paul rightly instructed last week, hate sin. Look at it and start opposition and speak the truth. But is the truth not the fact that God is love? Is it not that he loves them, or he doesn't see the red and the green? He sees his Son's work. And if we really believe what we say we believe, if I can really come up here and tell you I'm not going anywhere else because he's the only thing that gives me joy. Lose everything else, I have him, I'm okay. If I really believe that, how can I possibly claim to love you and not tell you? How can I possibly claim to care about you and not share that with you? That is the truth you need. We'll figure out the rest of the details along the way. The last thing I'll say this morning. Peter's life has always spoken very directly to me. I've always found some relational component in my own life to Peter. Peter did his very best to serve God. A lot of times it just fell short, because he's human. But in a book that I've been reading in one of my Bible studies, Tony Evans, called A Kingdom Man, he writes this. If you live your life and you gain wealth, you gain a family, you gain all the friends and fame in the world, and yet you don't know Jesus and share him with the people you know, congratulations. You're a successful failure. Nothing more. You're a successful failure. Because the only thing that matters, when it's all wiped clean, when the storms of life hit, the water comes and everything's washed away, that's the only thing left that matters. And part of the reason I like Peter so much is that I don't want to be like Peter. I don't want to stand before Jesus at the end of my time and Jesus asked, did you hear the rooster I set for you? Well, Lord, I never denied you verbally. No, but your apathy spoke louder. You remember the sheep and the goats, all thinking they were going to the kingdom. And Jesus said, I was cold. You did not clothe me. I was hungry. You did not feed me. I was sick. You did not come to visit me. I do not want to deny my Lord with apathy. Apathy speaks volumes. What we do not do is just as important as what we do. Sometimes it's really hard to look in the mirror and look at. Sometimes we get caught looking at our red. Don't do that. It's there. Let's correct it. But the red's gone. It's been erased. That is not who I am. It is not who you are. It's not who Peter was. For time and time again, Jesus looked at the sin and loved the sinner. We see that exemplified in the story of Peter. I'm going to close this morning by singing a song so appropriate to Change My Heart. Change my heart, God. And as we sing that, for any believer hearing this, I hope that that is a desperate plea of your heart. That God comes in and changes our hearts so much that when we look at the people that are different from us, we look at the people that aren't in our pews at Sunday morning, we see them the way He saw us. Because remember, without Him, we still got a lot of red. He loved us. He loves them. He calls us His bride. We are the one that gets to carry that message. And if you happen to be here this morning, you've never experienced that freedom. You've never experienced that joy and that peace that knows no matter what you've done, no matter where you've been, no matter where you're going to go, He loves you. Because your past doesn't define you. We'll be sitting right there. I'd love to answer any questions you may have.